rock that boat, boat. Don't rock that boat, baby. Let's remember the simple phrase, don't rock the boat, don't rock that boat, baby. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, just relax and let it flow. Don't rock the boat, don't rock that boat, baby. If you don't feel it, don't force it, just chill out and let it flow. Don't rock the boat, don't rock that boat, baby.
Now to the investigation surrounding a deep-sea disaster near the wreckage of the Titanic.
Officials say a catastrophic event, likely an implosion, killing all 5 people on board.
In June of 2023, a tourist submarine disappeared on an expedition to explore the Titanic shipwreck. A submarine named Titan, owned by OceanGate Expeditions, submerged on a dive to the Titanic wreckage site when the crew of the Polar Prince research ship lost contact with the sub about an hour and 45 minutes later. For days, the fate of the sub and its passengers was a mystery. I think we know that this story is fake, but instead of putting that together, I think we can prove it was fake simply by showing what they were exploring was fake. Let's visit the Titanic for them. Once called the gateway to the world and is literally soaked in history, on April 10, 1912, the Titanic left its port in Southampton, England, and began the transatlantic journey to New York City in the United States. Considered unsinkable, the Titanic served as a luxury ocean liner. But on April 15, the Titanic sank in just over 2.5 hours after colliding with an iceberg.
Fucking me! Turning!
More than 100 years later we will expose the script that fooled the world. For one, this famous maiden voyage of the world's most famous ship was strangely underbooked. The ship was at a little over half capacity, so it reminds us immediately of the were said to have crashed on. They were also about half empty.
Totally apple juice. Way to go, wait, start.
Although we get a lot of different numbers from the mainstream reports, one source says the Titanic could take 2,566 passengers, but only 1,317 were allegedly on board. They had about 1,249 more seats to fill. Also, a red flag is the mainstream's pathetic attempt to explain this by saying, there was a coal strike in the UK that spring, causing many crossings to be cancelled. But wait. Wouldn't that make this uncancelled voyage even more packed? They should have had thousands of people on standby lists, shouldn't they? People who had had their other ship cancelled and needed to get across the pond. In fact, that is part of the story in other places.
The Dean family should never have been on board. They had tickets for another ship, but the crossing was cancelled. Instead, White Star offered them third-class tickets on its new luxury ocean liner.
Another problem is that mainstream math fails, to this day. In some places, they told us 1,317 passengers were on board, but 2,222 total were on board including passengers and crew members. With 1,500. If we subtract, that means there was a crew of 722 on board for 1,317 passengers. So basically every passenger had his own personal crewman. Despite the fact that 709 of the passengers were allegedly in third class and shouldn't have expected much service. Only 324 were in first class. So, as I said, the numbers don't add up. You will see what I mean if you include one other fact. Many of those in first class were already traveling with their own servants, so they didn't need service from a crew, except for food service. For instance, we are told Astor and his wife were traveling with their private valet and 2 ladies' maids. More indication of that is the total capacity of the Titanic, stated to be 3,547. That would be with a crew of 1,094. So at full capacity, the ship would have that crew, but with 53.7% capacity, they had a crew at 83%. As I said, it doesn't add up. They had about 320 more crew than they needed, even if we believe the given numbers. 212 crew are said to have survived, so my guess is that was the entire crew on board. The others were just made up. Another problem is that on a headline from the New York Herald on the same day, April 15, and that headline clearly states 1,800 on board, 675 saved. How did the Herald compose this story so quickly? The Titanic goes down in the wee hours of April 15, and a few hours later the Herald has a full story, including pictures of all the famous people on board. That's some pretty amazing work, isn't it? It looks like they already had the story written and illustrated before it even happened, which is pretty much par for the course. You will tell me that says April 16, but that isn't how it looks to me. Also, we find it on eBay, where it is confirmed that the headline is from April 15. We see the New York Times also had a story ready to go on the morning of April 15, stating 1,200 on board and 655 saved. The New York Tribune says 1,340 perished, with 886 rescued, putting 2,226 on board. The Detroit News reported 1,241 missing and 868 saved, putting 2,109 on board. Where are all these different numbers coming from? But of course, as they always do, years later they came up with an explanation.
The day after the sinking of the Titanic, newspapers around the world reported that all the passengers aboard had been saved, with headlines like, "Titanic sinking, no lives lost," and "all saved from the Titanic." How could so many newspapers get it so wrong? The state-of-the-art wireless telegraph transmitter installed by Marconi, the leading technology company, was the Titanic's sole connection to the rest of the world. Other ships in the vicinity had similar transmitters. It turns out that the frantic messages that burst forth in the early hours of April 15, 1912 were chaotic. During the course of wireless chatter, someone asked, "Are the passengers safe?" An answer came, "The ship is being towed to Halifax and everyone is okay." The only problem was that neither the question nor the response were about the Titanic and her passengers. It referred to another ship. When reporters got wind of the story, misinformation spread like wildfire. The scale of the disaster overshadowed any scandal that may have arisen from this appalling misreporting. And so, the whole saga was simply forgotten.
Yeah, right.
This is a bad attempt at keeping everyone quiet, it's also a bad attempt at comedy. I can see some confusion on the number missing, but since all ships are required to have a full passenger and crew list, the total on board should be a firm number. It should not vary from 1,200 to 2,226. And if we look closely, we find the New York Times admitting its information came from the Olympic by wireless telegraph. That means these numbers were coming straight from White Star Lines, which should have known the total on board. At any rate, it would not be telling some newspapers one number and other newspapers another number. Unless it wanted to create confusion. It looks to me like someone decided to inflate the number from about 1,200 to about 2,200 in the first week. Another problem is that they give us a partial list of 68 prominent people on the Titanic, but only 21 are listed as perished. So the survival rate for rich people was still very good, being about 70%. That's very curious as well. In fact, that is what led me to my initial assumption. Most of the people listed as perished probably. Realistically speaking, we have no real evidence that a ship went down, it was basically in the middle of nowhere. The average citizen will never explore that area. But when people like the captain and Astor, the richest man in the world, appear to go down with a ship, far fewer people will be suspicious. And of course, the usual. John Jacob Astor. Robin Gardner's 1998 book Titanic. The ship that never sank was either misdirection or mistaken. He makes the claim about the switch of the Titanic for the Olympic in the insurance fraud. However, I believe if someone can figure out the case of insurance fraud, I'm pretty sure those behind paying that amount of money would surely figure it out first. Remember the conflicting reports and the predictive programming of the boat sinking. Would you pay someone millions without looking into anything? So doing everything for insurance money doesn't make much sense to me. But it looks like he's planted to put that out. He never got to any of the bigger stuff. That may have been his assignment. For instance, it is curious that Wikipedia has a page for both Gardner and his theory. It even seems to be promoted, since both on Gardner's page and on the page for Titanic Alternative Theories, his theory is given 10 paragraphs and no rebuttal. Not what you would expect. Captain Edward Smith is also strange. His biography is very slight. We are told that Lloyd's of London insured the Titanic and had to pay out around $10 million just for the lost ship. That's according to the Denver Post, 1912. But that same article states Lloyd's only had $15 million on deposit, so they just lost 2/3 of their value. They should have been devastated but apparently weren't, so something doesn't add up here. We were told they paid in full within 30 days. That doesn't sound right. Since none of us have had that experience with insurance companies. They normally drag their feet for the smallest claim. But we are supposed to believe they were able to fully investigate this Titanic fiasco in under 30 days, although it happened out in the middle of the North Atlantic. Also note the date of that article at the Denver Post. April 16, the day after. So are we supposed to believe they wrote this promotion of Lloyd's overnight? They didn't have anything better to report in the first 24 hours than this glowing promotion of the insurance company. Think. That by itself is a huge clue. Also curious that we are told Lloyd's was involved in the development and implementation of the wireless telegraph that was used for the first time with the Titanic, but which did no one any good. But remember, we don't know what the telegraphs actually said. Wireless could be used to call for help, but it could also be used to coordinate a massive fraud at sea, couldn't it? Back to Astor. He was said to have been one of 333 pulled from the sea. These people have huge estates all over the world, so faking a is no inconvenience at all. Actually, Astor didn't even need to travel by public transport like the Titanic. These people have their own private ships or can hire their Greek billionaire cousins to take them anywhere, with no questions asked by customs agents anywhere. The rules don't apply to them, and they only admit their existence to start with because they want to see themselves in the papers. We may assume there are wealthy people that you have never heard of. They have never officially existed. They don't have to us because they have never officially been alive. My guess is it.
Would you be willing to make a deal?
Name your price.
Your soul.
With all the conflicting numbers we were told, of course, we got the fake surviving crisis actors. We see this alleged survivor is clearly being told what to say in this interview.
You'd better go back and tell her that we're going to double bank all the watches on deck and below, and tell him we are
on our way.
On our way.
As fast as you could go.
Yes, as fast as you could go.
Fine, thank you, Mr. Cobb.
You'd better go back and tell her that we're going to double bank all the watches
On deck and below, and tell him we are
On our way.
on our way.
As fast as you could go.
Yes, as fast.
Which is an indication of a crafted lie.
Well, when I got out on deck, I noticed the gentleman standing by the rail and several people in a large, again, this grayish mass. I said, what on earth is that? That Oh, madam, that's a light bulb. Oh, that's an iceberg.
I said, what on earth is there? That? Oh, madam, that's a light bulb. Oh, that's an iceberg.
Carpenter came along, and I heard him say, the bloody mailroom's full of water.
Conflicting stories about music.
Did you hear the music playing?
I did.
Almost till the end.
Till the end, I heard them play. You know, Wheel of My God to Thee.
Wheel of My God to Thee.
Well, there's no question about the fact that they played, and there's no question about the fact that after we were down on the water and they were playing.
But when people say that music played as the ship went down, that is a ghastly, horrible lie.
Band was playing as the ship went down. Cool and the gang would have been unplugged and shit. Man, let's get the fuck out of here.
We should look more closely at Lloyd's. Lloyd's is a towering red flag from the first word, since it isn't really an insurance company. It is a group of companies and individuals, or a syndicate, that is joined as underwriters of risk. It was created by the Act of Parliament in 1871, though it had existed since 1686, and is one of the spookiest companies in the world. Curiously, we find that there was a Lloyd's Act passed by Parliament in 1911, just a few months before the Titanic hoax. A clue is even found on the date of the act, August 18, 1911. Or, aces and eights, as usual. One of the objects was to extend Lloyd's underwriting from marine to all sorts of insurance, including life insurance, and all guarantee business clause 3. Another important extension was to make one of the main objects of society the collection, publication, and diffusion of intelligence and information. In other words, Lloyd was being made part of the worldwide intelligence community by acts of Parliament. All this happened just a few months before the Titanic hoax. Coincidence? I don't think so. Also note the in diffusion part of that quote. Lloyd's wasn't just approved to collect intelligence, it was approved to diffuse it. What is diffusing intelligence? Wouldn't that be propaganda? Lloyd's was also Since Lloyd's has an extensive intelligence gathering department, it should look odd that it failed to discover these things, and never brought any of the anomalies up in court. I can't help but notice how not the minor insurers of the Titanic are long dead, and their ancestors have no reason to reopen the case. Gladys Malvina Dean was alleged to be the last survivor of the Titanic until she in 2009. She was 2 months old in April of 1912. First of all,
Rock that boat! Boat! Don't rock that boat, baby! Let's remember the simple phrase, don't rock the boat, don't rock